4:30 in the morning when the phone rings without warning. A little shorter, yeah, he'd love a little more. But he knows somewhere somebody out there needs him. Destiny's calling. Grabs him a quiet kiss, cup of coffee, and he's out the door. 'Cause there's a job to do and a chosen few strong enough to take that call. Takes a special kind to make that sacrifice, lend a helping hand to all. You know the kind of leave the fears behind, kind of step out on the line and save the world again. You know the kind, never quit till the day is through, looking out after me and you, what it comes to in the end. Must be some kind of hero, you know. When the storms of life are raging and the darkness closes in, there are those who give their heart and soul to help along the fellow man, with the courage of our fathers and devotion of a friend. There's a light in the kind of hero got us safely home again. You know the kind of leave the fears behind, kind of step out on the line and save the world again. You know the kind, never quit till the day is through, looking out after me and you, what it comes to in the end. Must be some kind of hero, you know the kind of leave the fears behind, kind of step out on the line and save the world again. You know the kind, never quit till the day is through, looking out after me and you, what it comes to in the end. Must be some kind of hero, must be some kind of hero, must be some kind of hero, you know.
Next, we'd like to have Michael Bornia come up and read the notice of the 2014 annual meeting.
The annual meeting of the members of Highline Electric Association will be held in the Phillips County Event Center at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March 25th, 2014, to transact the following business. First, the report of officers, directors, and committees. Second, election of all directors. Third, all business which may come before the meeting or any adjournment thereof in connection with the election of directors scheduled for this meeting. The following members have been nominated for director by petition pursuant to the bylaws. For election of 2 directors from District 1, representing members in Logan, Washington, Weld, and Morgan counties in Colorado, Michael Bornia and Mark Stromberger are the incumbent directors. For election of 1 director from District 2, representing members in Phillips and Yuma counties in Colorado, Aaron Sprague is the incumbent director. The unimproved minutes of the 2013 annual meeting are posted on our website, www.hea.coop. Next, we would have the reading and approval of the minutes of the 2013 annual meeting. Now, I certainly will read them, but I'd certainly prefer to have a motion to forego that. I have a motion. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Appreciate the minutes are approved.
Thank you, Michael. The next item on our agenda will be the election of 3 candidates from District 1. Michael Bornia, another from District 1 is Mark Stromberger, and from District 3, Aaron Sprague. As we did not have any petitions turned in to run against these individuals, there will not be an election of that such here. But I will ask that call for a motion and have these current candidates reelected. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Pardon? Okay. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we cast a unanimous ballot. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. The 3 candidates that are presently on the board will continue. The next item is the introduction of the 2013 Washington Youth Tour delegates. And Dixie, if she's ready.
I'd like to introduce our youth camp delegates. These are great kids, and I just really get fond of them. My saying is, what is my saying? Gosh, that left me. It was great. I know it was great. I know. I say, every year I say how great the kids are, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it because they really are. So we have Deborah Kurtzer, and Deborah's a senior at Fleming High School, and she's the daughter of Randy and Sue Kurtzer. And Brandon Struckmeyer is a junior at Holyoke High School and is a son of Dale and Jennifer Struckmeyer. And I just really appreciate these kids taking the time to come tonight because Deborah just got back from Haiti, and Brandon, about 15 minutes ago, was dropped off from a school bus out front because they'd been looking at colleges today. So anyway, help me welcome them, please.
Okay, thank you. The Cooperative Youth Leadership Camp was very different than any other camp I've been to over the years. All other leadership functions that I've attended have never gotten the kids so involved in the camp activities and meeting new people. One of the best lessons I learned from this camp is not to be afraid of going out on a limb and talking to someone I've never met. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to be besties at the first conversation, but because I now have experience with new people, asking for directions doesn't seem so hard, and finding a new friend throughout everyday life isn't so impossible. On day 1, we got into our predetermined groups. These groups were made up of the people we would eat lunch and dinner with every day we were at camp. We also participated in camp activities like a legislative simulation, which was way more fun than it sounds, I promise. We also had to build a transmission line. My group found out quick that dioramas were not our strong suit. Our diorama of a transmission line came in last out of all the groups. I personally made little linemen out of popsicle sticks, tiny fuzzy pom-poms, and googly eyes. I had fun. Not only did we learn about the deliverance and conservation of energy, but we also took some breaks from the academic part of camp. These breaks included many new experiences, one of them being a particular 30-foot cliff we jumped off while on our whitewater river rafting field trip. This was definitely not something I would try on a regular day in my regular life. But this was CYLC, a place to make memories. And besides, they wouldn't let us do something if it was going to kill us. At least, that was what I kept telling myself. On the day we took a tour of Trapper Mine, we learned that coal is not as dirty as many people think, and most of the smoke we can see emerging from the smokestack is really just steam. We also got to go into one of the mines and get on top of a huge crane, which was pretty cool. Another highlight of the trip to Steamboat Springs was the restaurant at the top of a mountain where we could see everything while we ate our last dinner as a whole group. To get off the mountain, we were allowed to take the gondolas all the way down to flat ground. All in all, I would say that CYLC 2013 was a complete success, and I would absolutely encourage all youth that are members of HEA to apply. I promise you'll meet new people you won't forget, and you'll have a blast doing it. Thank you.
All right, I prepared a brief presentation that I prepared. First, I would like to thank Highline for letting me go this year, or last year, and this year. I found a picture of our entire group. Our first day, maybe. Let's see. Our first day, that's, as Deborah said, that's when we got broken up into our small groups. We started with a few games, and we got our shirts and a towel, which they said on the slip bring 50 cents. And the shirt I'm wearing right now is the one we got. And then day 2. Ooh, maybe. All right, day 2. That's when we went to the. Yeah, that's when we went up to the Fish Creek. Yeah, Fish Creek Falls. I expected we were just going to do hiking, but we did more than that. We actually got to see waterfalls. Every kid was in the water. We had fun. And then we went and toured Steamboat Springs. The friends I traveled with there, we really liked hats. The first place we visited was an ice cream shop. And then my two friends at the bottom, Liberty and Duncan, found little puppets to play with. And more hats. And then once we got back, we got a display on high voltage. That was my favorite part, especially at the end when the pickle blew up and we got pickle juice all over ourselves. Day 3, that's when we went whitewater rafting. We got to ride in our own separate vans. Some of the people that I got to ride with, became really good friends with. And then after that came the dance. And that's my favorite part, too. Yeah, the entire camp was my favorite. Day 4, I thought was really interesting. First, we got to see a bird presentation. There was a falcon, a bald eagle, and an owl, a great horned owl. I think that was it. And then the talent show, where we announced the volleyball winners, and then we took group pictures. This was my group. Sorry, Deborah, I didn't get a picture of yours.
It's okay.
And then day 5, that's when we visited the power plant. The power plant you see is actually the one that we went to. This is just Colorado and Oklahoma. We got split up into, and then day 6, was the final day to say goodbye. That was the saddest day. And that's the end of my side. Thank you.
I'd like you to meet Jake Girk. He was our candidate to Washington, D.C., and I've been trying to talk him into going into politics because I think he would make a great president of the United States someday. And wouldn't it be cool if you could say, Jake, when you were a kid, I was at the annual meeting in 2014. Or Mr. President. Anyway, Jake is a senior at Haxton High School and is the son of Richard and Dina Girk. Help me welcome him, please.
Thank you. There are a lot of people here. All right. Okay, well, I was the delegate to go to Washington, as Dixie said. And this was from June 13th through the 20th last summer. And we spent our first day at United Power and at the state capitol in Denver. And then we spent the next 7 days in Washington. And I was told to try to highlight the things that really stood out to me on this trip, so that's what I did here. This is a picture of my group at the state capitol. There are just about 30 other kids that were on this trip. And we also went to United Power in Brighton, and I didn't get any pictures of that, though. Something that I thought was really cool there, we saw how the linemen climb the poles, and they have like these spikes on the side of their shoes, and I just never knew that, and I thought that was really a cool deal. And I had never even been to the state capitol before, and that was a really cool tour that we got to do for that. That was even before Washington, where we got to tour everything. Our first day in Washington, we got to go to Mount Vernon, and we got to spend our whole day here. And this is where George Washington lived, and it's right on the other side of the picture there is the Potomac River, and it's a really, really pretty place where he lived. And it was a really cool experience. And then on the grounds of Mount Vernon is George Washington's actual, like that's where he was laid to rest. And I just thought that was a really cool thing to have been 10 feet away from actual George Washington. The next day was the day that we went to all of the different memorials that we went to. And this one was the World War II memorial. And it was Father's Day, and there were lots of World War II veterans being wheeled in on their wheelchairs by their sons and grandsons. And as they were coming in, we kind of like lined up along the sidewalk and like shook their hands and like told them thank you for their service and everything. And these guys, it was really cool. They were crying and like telling us thank you for thanking them and appreciating it, and it was a really cool experience. This is Arlington National Cemetery, and I thought it was kind of a funny thing, not really funny, but they took these grounds from the general of the Confederate Army from the Civil War, Robert E. Lee, and his house was even there, and we got to see that. And it's over 600 acres, and there are over 400,000 different headstones there, and couldn't believe that. This is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and that soldier there is the changing of the guard, and that happens every 30 minutes, and it's just amazing how precise everything that they do is. And our tour guide told us that they're there no matter what. Like Hurricane Sandy came through, and they were still right there. It's just, I couldn't even believe it. This is the Vietnam Wall. This one was really a crazy thing to me because this wall is 250 feet long, and there are tons of tiny little names on there, and it's just crazy to think that every single name was a real person that had a family and everything. It's just crazy to me. This is the National Cathedral. It's by far the biggest church that I've ever seen. And I actually took this picture myself, but behind there, you can't really see it, but there were clouds coming. And when the clouds as the way that they were moving, it looked like the whole cathedral was going to be falling down on top of us. It's kind of funny. And there had just been an earthquake right before our trip, so there were pieces of the cathedral that were on the sidewalk because they had fallen off. This is just a picture of a few people in my group waiting for the bus, because we did that quite a bit on this trip too. This is Ford's Theater, where Abraham Lincoln was shot. And it's just amazing to me. I've seen this picture in movies, and to actually see it for myself. This was in the house across the street from Ford's Theater where Abraham Lincoln passed away. And those are all pennies, and they make it look like Abraham Lincoln. I thought that was just a cool picture. This is a statue of oh my gosh, excuse me, Albert Einstein, and this is just a good place to take a group picture, so I thought that was kind of cool. Oh. Smithsonian. This was, I think, our 5th day, and we spent an entire day here, and I only went through 3 museums, and there are even more than that, and it was just an incredible thing to see all of the artifacts and everything that's there. A few of us decided that we ought to try to look like the soldiers in that picture on the statue. That was a cool place to go, too. And then we got to see the White House. I actually took this picture through the fence because we couldn't go on the actual tour of it or whatever, but that was really cool. Just like I said before, seeing the White House a million times and then to actually see it for myself is awesome. This is the Lincoln Memorial. I really thought this was awesome because of all of the historical things that have happened here, like Martin Luther King Jr. giving a speech and Forrest Gump, everything. I decided to put this picture on here just because I never knew how big Abraham Lincoln was, I took this picture myself, and it didn't turn out very well, but I thought that was kind of cool just because I've seen that on the penny forever, and there it actually was in real life. Our last day in Washington, we got to go visit the Capitol, and many of us had never been to the Capitol or even to Washington, so everybody got to take that picture, and I thought that was awesome. That was my profile picture on Facebook for a while even. We got to meet a lot of congressional members of Colorado, and Cory Gardner was my favorite because he's close to home and he was just a good guy. When we were waiting for him to meet us, he was still in a meeting, and we were sitting in his office, and his assistant was telling us some interesting facts about him. And he said that his district is something like the 4th most powerful nuclear nation, or it would be if it was a nation, because of all of the missile silos that are like along the eastern plains of Colorado. And I really thought that was an interesting thing. And once he got there, he was kind of getting to know everybody, and he asked if there was anybody from around Yuma. And I told him I was from Haxton. He said, "Oh, go Bulldogs." I just couldn't even believe that. Somebody that's like him in Washington, D.C., knows Haxton, Colorado. I thought that was amazing. Now he's even running for the Senate, so I say, go Cory Gardner. This is a movie about terrorists taking over the White House, and there are lots of, they go all over Washington, D.C., and I had just watched this movie right before I went on this trip, and it was really cool to me to see everything in person that was on this movie. And then this is on the airplane home. This was, for some reason, by mere happenstance, I guess, the airplane that we were on was dedicated to the people of Colorado, and it was a Southwest plane, and there was a bighorn sheep on the wing, and I thought that was pretty cool. I would like to give a special thanks to Dixie Fagerlin for taking me up there and bringing me back and being good company too. And thank you to Highline for letting me go on this amazing trip. Thank you.
Go Jake Girk, right? What do you think, Dixie? You think you'll get into his cabinet someday? Next, I'd like to introduce our manager, Mark Farnsworth. He has a presentation for us.
Is it working? Good. I'd like to thank our youth for coming up and sharing, and it's good to see that the generations coming up. So I'm glad that the board of directors has willingly sent young people, the youth of our service territory, to Washington, D.C., to the youth camp. I'm not real sure what kind of annual meeting this is going to be for me tonight. I've already tried to do one thing up here, and the computer was locked up. Then I have an open mic incident, and then I switched some agenda items on the board president. So this may be my last annual meeting that I get to stand up here. But good evening. I'd like to welcome you to Highline's 2014 annual meeting. And I'm going to take just a moment to introduce Highline staff and employees. And please stand up as I introduce you, and please hold your applause until the very end, if you would. I'd like to introduce Barb Holtzman, Executive Assistant. It's back in the back. Trent Loudensock, Manager of Engineering, back in the back there. David Churchwell, Operations Manager, over in the corner there. And Dennis Herman, Manager of Member and Corporate Services. I'd also like to have Dixie and Nancy stand up quick. They're the ones that put this annual meeting on and do all the work. I also here tonight is Jill Baumgartner. Back in the back, Deanna DeSelms, Marva Eckert-Miles, back there. Joni Groshans, Joni Kinney, back there. Tammy Kroger, Charlotte Norgren, back there. Jason Dolshaw, over there. Elin Nelson, James Ebarth, back in the corner. J.T. Baker, and Eric Ludke, and Robbie Adams. So please help me thank them for all the work they do for Highline. This time I'd like to call upon Dennis Herman, Manager of Member and Corporate Services, to present the financial report. Dennis?
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. We purchased 434,218,954 kilowatt hours in 2013 from our power supplier, Tri-State Generation and Transmission. This was down 150 million kilowatt hours from 2012. We sold to you, our members, 396 million kilowatt hours, a decrease of 142 million from 2012. Irrigation accounted for the largest share of kilowatt-hour purchases, with 63.4% of the kilowatt-hours sold. Large commercial followed with 15.4%, residential at 15.2%, and small commercial with 6% of the total kilowatt-hours sold. Here's a look at historical kilowatt-hour sales over the last 10 years, with the addition of irrigation and gas compression loads contribution to sales over the same time frame. These two classes, more than any other, experience a high degree of variability from year to year. While irrigation is obviously dependent upon the weather, our gas compression loads vary depending upon factors in the natural gas market. Our irrigation sales of 251 million kilowatt hours in 2013 were 59 million kilowatt hours lower than 2012 irrigation sales. While there is no normal for annual irrigation sales, the average over the past 10 years is 220 million kilowatt hours. Our large gas compression loads purchased 92 million kilowatt hours fewer in 2013 than they did in 2012, leaving us with a net decrease in sales of 142 million kilowatt hours from 2012. Operating revenues for 2013 were just short of $47 million, which was a decrease of $7.2 million from 2012. In addition, the board chose to defer $1.2 million in revenue, which Mark will talk more about later. The decrease in revenue is largely due to the decrease in kilowatt-hour sales to our irrigation and gas compression customers. Our operating margins in 2013, after the revenue deferral, were $1,018,237. With this operating margin, Highline was able to meet all of our mortgage requirements. The most stringent of these requirements is O-tier, or operating times interest earned ratio. O-tier is a function of the interest on long-term debt, operating margins, and cash received from Tri-State for capital credit retirements. Our mortgages require that our O-tier, when averaged over 2 years, remains above a minimum level. Our operating margin in 2013 was sufficient to keep us in good standing with our lenders. Highline's operating margins are generated from the sale of electricity to our members. There are other non-operating margins that Highline receives from cooperatives that we are members of. Tri-State represents Highline's largest investment in other cooperatives. Highline margins for 2013, after the $1.2 million revenue deferral, were $3,500,291. This is comprised of the Highline generated operating margins of $1,018,237, $2,354,248 that was generated by our memberships in Tri-State, Western United, CoBank, and CFC, and $127,807 in interest and other non-operating income. The bottom line margin of $4,700,291 before revenue deferral is allocated to you as capital credits. In 2013, the Board of Directors approved a capital credit refund that included the balance of 1998 and 50% of 1999 Highline capital credits, and 67.9% of 1993 Tri-State capital credits, for a total general retirement of $2,203,639. We also retired estates totaling $88,025 in 2013, for a total of $2,291,664 returned to our members. This slide shows our capital credit allocations and refunds since 1948. We have accrued capital credits of $96.7 million. We have refunded to estates $4.68 million over this time period, and again, our general refund in 2013 was $2,203,639. Refunds in prior years were $30.4 million, totaling $37.3 million returned to our members since 1948. When we consider the $1.2 million revenue deferral, your member capital credit balance is $59.4 million, of which $18.7 million is comprised of equity in Highline, and $40.7 million represents equity in Tri-State. We are currently on a 15-year retirement cycle for Highline capital credits, and as Tri-State retires capital credits to Highline, we return that money to our members through retiring Tri-State capital credits. We took advantage of the current interest rate environment and advanced a $5 million loan from the Federal Financing Bank in 2013. The interest rate on this 35-year loan is 3.3%. As a result of the advance of loan funds, we ended 2013 with cash and investments of $12.8 million. Highline's utility plant ended the year valued at $92.2 million, which is a $4.5 million increase over last year. As you can see, our plant growth has been steady over the last 5 years. In 2013, we added 10 miles of new overhead lines. Our density remains at just over 2 meters per mile of line. Even though we experienced a small dip in equity as a result of the $5 million loan advance, Highline continues to maintain a strong balance sheet. We ended 2013 with an equity level of 53.8%, or 54.9% when we consider the effects of the deferred revenue. Equity measures the extent that you as members have financed plant in lieu of borrowed capital. Highline has an equity management plan that calls for a minimum of 50% equity. I'd like to finish by talking about our expenses for just a moment. The cost to maintain our plant and make sure electricity is available, basically the cost of running Highline, was 17% of our total expenses in 2013. Depreciation and interest was another 10%, and our cost of wholesale power was 73% of our expenses last year. As you can see, what happens at the generation and transmission level with Tri-State has a very large impact on the bill we send to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I will refer to some of that financial information again in just a moment, and I would like to talk about the past, present, and future to some degree tonight. And I will take questions at the end of my talk. But before I start, I have a video that I'd like to show you that shows you what management style that I utilize.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories, it's I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
UDS, managing the complexities of the digital economy.
I went through there kind of fast, so you might have missed the management styles that I utilize, so I thought I'd point them out real quick. I tend to go in circles a lot. I'm always trying to put things back together again, rolling them back up, and I'm always cleaning up my messes. But as this cowboy said, I wouldn't do nothing different. So with that, let's get down to business. This slide is our utility plant growth over the last 5 years. We have spent an average of $2.6 million a year in new and rebuilt plant to serve you. In 2013, our spending on plant increased to $4.5 million. We are celebrating our 76th anniversary this year, and while we do plan on changing out a certain portion of our utility plant on a yearly basis, a major event happened in 1977. Does anybody remember 1977, what happened? Yes, we had a blizzard. We had a major spring storm that took down much of our utility system. That was 37 years ago, and we're now beginning to replace some of the poles from that year. We're also doing a major change out of the substation transformers in the Lamar, Alvin, and Creed substations. We ordered a new substation transformer for the Lamar substation, moved the Lamar substation transformer to Alvin, and then we moved the Alvin substation transformer to Crete. The irrigation load from those three substations had grown to the point that all three transformers were very close to being to their limits. We have an aggressive construction work plan for the next 5 years to replace old and outdated transmission, distribution lines, and related equipment. Many of you remember the busy times of the 60s, 70s, and 80s as we built the Highline system. We know what to do, and it's important that we provide you with reliable electricity. This slide shows what has happened to our equity the last 5 years, and particularly the last 2 years. Highline has two ways of financing the rebuilding of utility plant. We can get the capital from our members through our electric rates, or we can borrow to finance the rebuilding of our utility plant. The board and management have looked closely at the two options to determine what is the most affordable way to pay for capital improvements. The decision was made to borrow money because of the low interest costs of the last few years. The lower equity level is a result of borrowing a higher percentage of debt instead of having the members finance the capital improvements. While this decision causes a lower equity level, your cooperative remains financially stable and strong. Affordable power bills are important to Highline. Tri-State passed onto Highline a 1.7% rate increase for 2014. In our budget projections, we were able to eat that increase and not pass that increase on to our members. What we did discuss in depth was the potential short-term future forecasted rate increases from Tri-State. This slide is a Tri-State long-term financial forecast, and it outlines forecasted capital expenditures over the next 20 years. In the next 3 to 5 years, Tri-State has forecasted rate increases in the 5 to 7% range because of the needs shown on this graph. Environmental as well as transmission needs to serve Tri-State members will drive these increases. This slide shows the rate projections of Tri-State into the future. I do want you to understand that these are forecasts and that Tri-State is conservative in their approach, so unless something unforeseen happens, these numbers could be lower. Nonetheless, your board of directors asked the question, how can we keep future increases to the cost of inflation? One tool to use is revenue deferral. As shared earlier, the operating margins for 2013 were considerably above budgeted expectations. This allowed the deferring of $1.2 million to future years. We'll bring back into our balance sheet $400,000 a year for the next 3 years. If we have operating margins above budget for the next few years, the board will review the financials to determine if revenue deferrals will be used in future years. As you look at this slide, the red line is projected future power costs. The yellow line denotes our goal of keeping future rate increases to the rate of inflation and smoothing out rate impacts on our members. The purple line is the forecasted cost of electricity without inflation. Revenue deferral will not be used to keep rates artificially low, but to manage our costs in our goal of keeping your power bills affordable. We have seen these kinds of forecasts in the past, and we have a new tool to use in managing upward cost pressures. I've been talking about technology in my articles in the Colorado Country Life. So, could we have the lights turned off? Could everybody pull out your cell phone? If you could pull out your cell phone and act like you're what you do to make a call. See some cell phones around? Okay, turn the lights back on, please. 10 years ago, how many of us would have thought that we would be carrying around a telephone and a computer in our pockets? Do you think you'd be doing that? That we could be watching television on our phones? Some of you watch TV on your phones. Or we could Google any information we needed from the internet. Technology will continue to have a profound impact on Highline in the future. I've shared in the past our partnership with our good friends to the South YW Electric. We work together to lower costs by utilizing shared employees and equipment. We are working together in 2014 on advanced metering infrastructure project. We'll be evaluating different technologies to bring value to Highline and our members. If you have been reading my articles in the CCL, I mentioned the impact of technologies in the oil and gas industries and its effect on Highline. That technology is fracking. 3 years ago, we sold over 217 million kilowatt hours to gas compression loads to move natural gas from western Colorado to the Midwest and the Northeast. Last year, we sold under 17 million kilowatt hours to move natural gas from the west to the east. The fracking of natural gas wells in the Midwest and the Northeast has turned the industry inside out. And I don't believe that our largest single load will move as much gas again as they did in 2010. The Pony Express pipeline is now converted to oil from natural gas. We serve a compression plant station near Sterling. That compression plant is being rebuilt now to move oil from the Bakken Formation in the Dakotas, as well as oil being produced from Sterling west to Greeley. Now, you did not see a large negative impact on our financials because we asked these loads to be responsible for all upfront costs of serving them. We do lose some margins, but our rates are designed such that our different rate classes pay their own way, and we don't subsidize other rate classes. Renewable energy. Let's move clockwise around this slide. In the top left-hand corner is the Tri-State Cimarron Utility Scale Solar Farm in New Mexico. The 30-megawatt plant operates at an efficiency rate of 20%. The cost of power from the facility is above market prices. The next picture is some of the turbines from the Colorado Highlands project by Fleming. In 2013, the wind farm operated at 47% capacity factor or produced electricity 47% of the time. The cost of power from the facility is at market price, so it is a good resource. Highline serves 2 wind farms and a part of a 3rd wind farm, and it is kind of interesting, but we sell electricity to those wind farms also. The next photo is a different kind of small wind turbine that we place at our office. This would be for home use. We've not said a lot about it because it doesn't work. Other utilities with small-scale wind are above the cost of power that you pay for your electricity. The last photo is a small-scale solar array behind our office in Holyoke. The units have produced electricity, but it's still an expensive way to generate electricity. Now, new technology will come into play and may change the feasibility of small-scale renewable energy. We will stay involved because we work for our members, and our goal is reliable and affordable power bills. This screen capture is from the action.coop website. This is a picture of the cooperatives and power districts who are utilizing renewable energy in their energy mix. This could be renewable energy that we buy from members, projects they build or contract for, and renewable energy provided by their power supplier. There is a misconception that cooperatives and power districts are ignoring renewable energy. When you click the blue button in Northeast Colorado, you get this ribbon for Highline Electric Association. What it tells you is that we're using solar, wind, heat recovery, small-scale hydro, landfill waste renewable energy from Tri-State. It also tells you that Highline has their own 4 megawatt heat recovery renewable energy project. It will also tell you that Highline gets electricity from the federal hydropower dams. And only in the U.S. does large-scale hydro not count when talking about renewable energy. As I said before, we will evaluate renewable energy. We just believe it should be reliable and affordable. Tonight we have Kent Singer, Executive Director of Colorado Rural Electric Association. I've asked Kent to come and share with us a legislative report as well as to make some comments on Senate Bill 252. Kent?
Well, thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to have a few minutes on the agenda this evening. It's always great to get out of Denver, and really the further east you drive, the friendlier people get. I was noticing driving from Sterling to Holyoke tonight, this is what I was used to growing up in Kansas. You're driving along the road and you see somebody, they actually make eye contact with you, and they might nod or wave, or you're driving, do one of these things, and I see fingers in Denver, but they're not the index finger very often. So, but anyway, so it's nice to be out here. I think you're all familiar with CREA and kind of what we do. We have really 4 main functions. We have an education function, kind of a risk management function, a communications function, and a political function. And you heard some about the education function tonight. Some of your youth came and talked about the youth camp and the youth tour. And I just want to make sure you all understand on this youth camp up in Steamboat Springs that when it was reported that there was a cliff jump on that trip, that is not on the agenda for that trip. So that was a one-time only deal. That's not going to happen next year. We had several kids who made unfortunate landings on that cliff jump, and we had nothing to do with that. So I want to assure the parents out there who are considering putting your kids in that youth tour, that's not going to happen next year. But Liz Fittis runs the youth tour and youth camp, and it's a great program. I think it's one of the most important things CREA does. I said we had a risk management function. We work with your operations manager, David Churchwell, your linemen. One of the most important things CREA does, we've got 7 staff who interact with your line crews and your office crews to make sure that they keep safe. And that's a really important thing from your management and board's perspective, and we try to assist you in doing that. We have a communications function, which is Colorado Country Life primarily. You all get that. And Mona Neely and her staff do a lot on that magazine and other communication tools. And then lastly, what Mark asked me to talk about briefly was the political part of what we do, and that's sort of the most high-profile part of CREA. We get involved with the state legislature, as you know. We lobby the legislature. We have a couple lobbyists on staff and a contract lobbyist, and our job is to watch what happens at the legislature to protect electric co-ops and protect the ability of your board and your management to keep rates low and keep power affordable and reliable. And a year ago at this time, I would have come here and said, well, the 2013 session has been really quiet, no big deal. Well, about a week after that, of course, then all heck broke loose with Senate Bill 252. And we worked very hard to defeat Senate Bill 252 with Tri-States folks and a lot of folks. And it's got nothing to do with renewable energy. As Mark just reported, co-ops support renewable energy. There's certainly a place in the power supply portfolio for renewables. But this bill was flawed in a lot of respects. The folks who proposed it didn't include us in the discussions. If they had included us, we might have been able to get to a point where we could have agreed on something. But that never happened. And the bill got introduced with 5 weeks to go in the session and really just got ramrodded through the legislature. I think that's an accurate characterization. And, of course, the bill was sponsored by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. So as soon as we saw that, we knew the bill was very likely to pass. When you get that kind of sponsorship of a bill, it's going to pass. And so as you know, it doubled the renewable energy requirement for electric co-ops from 10% by 2020 up to 20% by 2020. And we were concerned about that. Like I said, we're always concerned about legislation which potentially impacts rates of co-ops, and we felt that Senate Bill 252 would do that. There's a whole lot of other problems with the bill in terms of how it's written. It talks about a 2% rate cap, and that language is unclear in terms of when do you have this off-ramp, the ability not to do any more renewables because you hit the 2% rate cap. So there are a lot of challenging parts of the bill to understand. This statute has gotten so convoluted over the years. But the long and short of this is the bill passed, as you all know, toward the end of the session. We met a couple of times with Governor Hickenlooper and asked that he veto the bill. And he listened to us. I appreciated the time he gave us. We met with him twice, about 45 minutes each time, and I think he understood our concerns. I think he's been out to eastern Colorado, to his credit, and at least faced the music on this and talked to folks about it. But he signed the bill into law. After he signed the bill, though, of course, he created this 252 advisory committee, and a committee to say, well, the bill's flawed. Let's look at how it should be fixed, which to me is sort of a backward process. You should have figured that out before you signed the bill. But that's what happened. That committee really didn't make any substantive changes, didn't make any recommendations for this year. There were a number of bills introduced early in this legislative session in 2014 to either repeal 252 entirely or change some of the standards, either put out the deadline past 2020 or reduce the 20% down to something else. And those bills were all killed, and we didn't put on a big fight for those bills this year. Certainly we testified in favor of them, but we could see the writing on the wall, and we didn't put on the big fight that we did on 252. We have had some discussions in the last couple of weeks on this piece that talks about distributed generation. One of the issues in the bill is that it requires 1% of distributed generation, which means essentially customer-sided rooftop solar, which can be very expensive, and we're concerned about that, and I think Mark may talk more about that later. But I just wanted to give you a kind of a feel for that whole process. Again, this year there were bills to mitigate 252. They did not pass. So once again, we're having a pretty quiet 2014 session, but I'm hesitant to say it's over because there's 6 weeks to go, and we still may see some other bills that impact co-ops. A couple of bills that have passed that we support. One bill increases penalties for copper theft, and you all know that that can be a problem in substations, and there's a bill that increases the penalties associated with copper theft. Another bill we've worked on has to do with these meteorological towers and the requirement to paint them, and we've worked with Jerry Sonnenberg, the State Representative Sonnenberg, and Senator Brophy out here to get that bill in a good shape. So, again, our job is to monitor all these bills at the legislature. They will introduce about 600 bills each year. We read through all of those and try to make sure there's nothing in there that will hurt co-ops. And so, like I said, there's about 6 weeks to go in the session, and we'll keep on trying to protect your interests and really protect the right of your co-op to make decisions out here and not have decisions come from Denver. So I appreciate the time to talk to you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Kent. Appreciate that update. This brings us to the issue of Senate Bill 252. He discussed it just in a little bit there. But if you've been reading my column in the Colorado Country Life, you'll have seen my take on the distributed generation section of SB 252. SB 252 would require Highline to get a portion of our kilowatt-hour sales, from behind the meter. This means small-scale renewables that we would then have to net meter. In my calculation, we would need to have installed 271 small solar units. And I used solar just to make the calculation easier. It could have been hydro, it could have been wind. If we just offered our rebate plus what the government offers for tax credits, we would subsidize them to the tune of $1,084,000. Now, we have offered that rebate I just mentioned for several years, and we have 5 systems installed. So do we need to double our rebate to incentivize those 271 units? If we double our rebate, that would be $2,168,000. Do we need to triple our rebate to incentivize those 271 units? If we did triple our rebates, that would be $3,252,000. So if we go back and divide the $1,084,000 by 10,350 meters, which is the meters that Highline serves, that means each member would pay $17.45 per month per meter to subsidize the distributed generation requirements of SB 252. Now, in fairness, there is a 2% cap there, which Kent mentioned. If our costs rise above 2% to provide renewable energy, then we can stop at that point. We need to calculate that 2% on a year-by-year basis. Now, there is some confusion about the 2% cap. Is there really a cap? If we invoke the cap, will there be lawsuits or new legislation to make us spend more? Again, Highline is not against renewable energy. We just don't think we should be subsidizing some members over other members. What brings the most value to our members? A small solar unit behind 271 meters or one community solar garden? Economies of scale would point to that community solar. the way SB 252 is written, we don't think it allows us to do so, even if that was the intention of the bill drafters. It was a poorly written bill. But in my opinion, SB 252 will be clarified in the future, and again, we'll see what changes that will bring. So stay tuned. I would like to introduce Barbara Walsh. She is the Senior Vice President for Policy and Compliance at Tri-State. I've asked her to just take a few minutes to share with you what our power supplier is facing. Barbara?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the Highline Board of Directors for the opportunity to be here this evening representing Tri-State. I come from rural North Dakota. I grew up in a co-op family, so it's always regenerating for me to get out and see our member owners and meet with the people that we actually work for, so it's a great pleasure to be here. As Mark mentioned earlier, I do policy and compliance, and when you choose that career, you aren't always the bearer of good news. So I'm just warning you here. I'm not here to give you a pep talk. And I'm apologizing in advance. As Mark said, we're facing increasing costs, and a lot of that is due to new regulations. And the regulations we're seeing coming at us are not in one specific area. It's safety, security, cybersecurity, environmental, reliability, etc. Today, I'm just going to focus on environmental, as Mark asked me to talk about some particular things that we're facing, so you can share in that information. Overall, the cost of our electricity, 20% of our costs comes from regulatory requirements that we have to comply with. In focusing in on environmental for you, I have this chart. This is a 6-year timeline. I know you can't read it from where you are, so please look at it from the big picture standpoint. This is a 6-year timeline, and every one of those things on there is a new environmental regulation that is coming at us just for our coal plants. And I'm focusing on coal not because it's our greatest resource or because Tri-State believes coal is the only way to go. Coal's only about 60% of our portfolio. If you add hydro, wind, and solar together, that's another 23%, and then gas makes up the rest. But that 60% is under attack right now, and you can see that just from the environmental side here. So what I'm going to do is briefly here just drill down and talk about one of these regulations and what's going on in Colorado with that. And this regulation is called the Regional Haze Rule. And what it does is it focuses on improving visibility. When you look into the horizon and you sometimes see haze, etc., that is called haze, and this rule is supposed to reduce that and get us back to natural conditions by 2064, pre-industrial natural conditions by 2064. And so the Clean Air Act, issued by Congress, says the states have the authority to determine what is best in their state to develop this requirement, improve visibility. So we went through a hearing in Colorado, and the state of Colorado came up with a plan on what they felt we should do in order to improve visibility. Just at Craig Station, I'm going to focus on. And that was to put a technology on each of the 3 units called selective non-catalytic reduction. It's about $20 million per unit, so that's a total of $60 million at Craig Station. And it reduces emissions by about 20%. But the state of Colorado felt that was sufficient to get us this far into the timeline, remembering we have till 2064 to get to natural conditions, as Congress said. Well, EPA didn't like that plan, and they want more. And honestly, 5 environmental groups got involved as well and pressed. We went through a hearing process, and we ended up with the results that you see in the blue bubbles here. And so what that does, it says we have to put on SNCRs on units 3 in 2015 and unit 1 in 2016. That's $20 million per unit. But it notched up then their requirement and 10 times the cost to put a higher technology on unit 2 in 2017. And that was an agreement that was in place. It went through a hearing. It went through the legislature. The governor signed off on it, and the federal EPA signed off on it. And then we had 2 more environmental groups sue us. And so now we're in a stage where I have the red bubbles that show you where the Wild Earth Guardians and National Parks Conservation Association have sued us again, or sued EPA for this rule, and they want the selective catalytic reduction on all 3 units. So instead of 20 million per unit, which is where the state of Colorado was, it's 200 million per unit is what these environmental groups want. We're still in the process. We're still fighting it. It takes, a lot of resources to do that, lawyers and analyzing costs, analyzing technology, analyzing visibility improvements. It's our position that when we look at the modeling, installing this level of technology will not improve the visibility. And so we are continuing to fight that, and our goal is to continue to provide affordable, reliable electricity to the member systems. So this just gives you kind of a big picture on one of those lines in this chart that I had here. So we're doing our best to face all these environmental regulations as we move forward. Our board of directors, which Leo sits on for Tri-State, has given us direction to make sure that we try to do what we can to mitigate regulations and keep costs reliable and affordable. So with that, I will tell you once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And again, I'm not always the bearer of good news, but these are the realities, and this is what was honestly going on in our world with all the regulations we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate it. Thank you, Barbara. I don't know if you caught that. Well, I'm sure you caught that, but we're talking $60 million worth of controls, and we're being asked to move that to $600 million worth of controls. So it's a big deal. Tri-State is governed again by its member cooperatives. Barbara talked about that. Leo Breckel sits on the Tri-State board. We have some of the cleanest coal-fired power plants in the world. And to me, it makes no sense to regulate existing clean coal-fired power plants out of existence. So we have asked you, our members, to participate in the past by sending emails or writing letters. This is a screen capture from the website action.coop. You can send a message to the EPA that asks them to do what our administration has repeatedly said, and that is that it supports an all-of-the-above energy strategy. All of the above is coal-fired power plants as well as natural gas, nuclear, and renewables. There are action.coop cards on the table. Now, we have asked you to fill out cards for different campaigns in the past. We're working on getting all these campaigns into one, but I would ask you to either visit the website or fill out that card before you leave tonight. Our goal is reliable and affordable power bills as we transition to the future. Your help is needed, so please send an email to the EPA at action.coop or fill out that card. So I'd like to thank you tonight for your attention and ask, do you have any questions? No questions? With that, I'd like to thank the board of directors, the Highline employees, their spouses, and most of all, I'd like to thank you, our members. We can't do this without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we'd like to present the list of winners. If you'd notice on the handout here that we put on your table, it showed last year's, and you may have looked at that, but these are the 2013 scholarship winners and the kids that went to camp and everything. And now we'd like to announce the 2014 scholarship winners. For the $1,000 Basin Electric Member Cooperative Consumer Scholarship, Krissa Bagazio of Sterling High School was the recipient of that. Highline has several $1,000 Highline Electric scholarships for a four-year college or university. Megan Pierce of Caliche High School, Alexandra Masters of Sterling High School, Tara Cook of Sterling High School, Arissa Shinio of Marino High School, Connor Block of Yuma High School, Madison Melvin of Fleming High School were all recipients of the $1,000 Highline Electric Scholarship. Highline has another $1,000 scholarship for individuals for a 2-year or technical school. Angela Ring of Caliche High School was a recipient. Jacob Girk of Haxton High School was a recipient. Mitch Davidson of Caliche High School is a recipient, and Jenna Zink of Caliche High School is a recipient. Tri-State also participates with a $500 Tri-State G&T/Highline Electric scholarship. Kenya Marquez of Revere High School will receive that $500 scholarship, and Ashley Humphreys of Holyoke High School will receive that. We'd also like to announce the 2014 Washington, D.C. Youth Tour delegate. Deborah Kurtzer of Fleming High School is that recipient. And the 2014 Youth Leadership Camp, kids that are going to go over to Craig and do that. Shayla Johnson of Caliche High School, Anna Roosh of Ralston Valley High School, Dylan Koch of Holyoke High School, and Brandon Struckmeyer of Holyoke High School. These are our recipients of the 2014 scholarship, and we'd like to give them all a hand. This brings us to unfinished business. Does anyone have any unfinished business to come before the meeting? Seeing none, are there any comments anyone would like to make? Any questions? Maybe something about Mark? I know you guys, Mark's presentation. It gets confusing to absorb all of that at an annual meeting, but these guys are really working hard to keep the power costs down. I'd like to thank Barbara and Kent and the other guys from Tri-State that come tonight. To conclude the meeting tonight, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I'd like to thank the employees for all the help they provided and all the people that came in to help with the meeting tonight. We'd also like to thank Christie's Catering for providing the meal.